It's your boy Vic's Vibes, and we are back with day 3 of the 30-day MetaSpark Certificate Challenge, where we will be going through all 3 courses that are free and provided by Meta, where we will be able to go from a beginner, intermediate to advanced level learning MetaSpark, which is their native augmented reality platform application. If you've ever seen, which I'm pretty sure you have, if you're even on this application or this video, you've probably seen filters before on social media. Well, filters are made from augmented reality. And this is something that I see being a very, very intricate part of the future of our just technological world, our digital age that we're living in and moving faster and faster into. So I want to go in and make sure that I fully understand this concept. And I decided that I wanted to actually bring people along with me, literally learn out loud. So people have the same opportunity to learn this skill set, but along with other people. If you go back to episode 2, there were a few parts where, because the way my screen is looking while I'm doing all this, I missed a few parts and I needed to troubleshoot. But because I had my good friend Yoshi here along with me, she was able to kind of help correct some of the spots where I may have missed and help expedite that. The fact that you guys get to see that process as I'm going through the videos, I'm explaining it back. So just in case you are missing something when you watch it, watching it here with us on this channel is going to allow for you to have that troubleshooting along with it. So with that being said, I don't want to delay any further. Let's go ahead and get into day 3, ladies and gentlemen, of our MetaSpark challenge. All right, on day 3 today, we will be watching a video within the quick start course, which is the intermediate or the beginner course, and we are on part 2, the basics of creating effects within Spark AR, and we are actually within the second video of part 2. This video is how to use lights to enhance your 3D effects. Okay, so with that being said, I'll go ahead and I was about to say spark up the video, but that's pretty corny. So with that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and start this thing up. Let's get to it.
We're now going to go a little bit deeper with some more advanced material properties, and we're then going to turn to lighting as well to see how it interacts with those materials. And by doing it, playing with those lights, we'll get a feel for how to move things around in 3D space, including those lights and the viewpoint of the camera. I've set up a new blank scene, and we're going to use this as our base for creating a quite abstract floating robot face type effect, which is going to allow us to explore some really interesting stuff and show you just how creative and crazy you can get with Spark AR Studio. So the first thing that we're going to do is create a face mesh, and I'm going to go to my add object here, choose face mesh and insert. And of course, we get our checkerboard look. Over on the right-hand side here, I'm going to add a new material, and I'll double click on this material and change my shader type to retouching to smooth the face off. So as we make the, start setting the robot face up, we want it to look super smooth and super synthetic. Now it can be handy as we start to construct more complicated effects to name things as we go. So up here where we...
Wait, where's the smooth? I think I missed that one. So
on the right hand side here, I'm going to add a new material.
Let me get you guys, every time, let me see, Spark. There we go. So let's go in and let me make sure we're full screen. So we selected a new material, said he wanted to, making it smooth. That's going to be under the spectacular. Okay, so all right, let's make sure we're on the same page. Let me play
material, and I'll double click on this material and change my shader type to retouching to smooth the face off. So as we make the, start setting the robot face up, we want it to look super smooth and super synthetic. Now it can be...
All right, so I just want to notice that misstep that I almost had. So I thought he said, right, keeping it under the standard. I thought when I heard him say, changing the smoothness, I thought, because yesterday we learned about, or the last few days, we learned about the specular, and then you're able to adjust the smoothness. But specifically, he was saying the shader type we're going to use is retouching, which I'm assuming automatically gives a layer of skin smoothness, which as you can see under our textures, it automatically just gave us that right there. So following along well, that was good. Good, good, good.
Be handy as we start to construct more complicated effects to name things.
Paul Wall, what's happening, big dog? What's going on with you, man? Good to see you, Brody. Good to see you. Good to see you, man. You know we working, Brody. We working, bro.
As we go. So up here where we have material 0, I can double click on this and just call it my retouching, maybe MAT for a shortcut, retouching matte, because you may have noticed that as we create objects and attach new materials to them, those materials show up also in our asset panel. So we can recycle them from there, which is really handy. I'm also going to go to my face mesh 0 here and rename this retouching mesh. So I can keep things very clean and easy to follow. Now, what I can do is, if you remember from before, we were looking at the different that
Wait, I wanted to catch. What is the second thing he changed?
as we create objects and attach new materials to them, mesh. So I can keep things very in this retouching
Gotcha.
mesh. So I can keep things very clean and easy to follow. Now, what I can do is, if you remember from before, we were looking at the difference between a face tracker and a retouching mesh. We can actually create multiple face meshes to layer different looks over the top of each other. If you're creating really complex beauty looks, for example, this can work really well for creating different layers of makeup over the top of each other. But I'm going to go to Add Object and create a new face mesh. And what we've noticed is I don't have it parented underneath the face tracker. So we can see the mesh is responding to the movements of my face, but it's not moving with my head. So we need to grab that face mesh and drag it up underneath the face tracker. And now it's tracking over the top of that face as well. And we can work with it from there. And so this one, I'm going to use to add some.
All right, so I want to. Yo, Top Money, what's happening? My dog said I made it. What's going on? So here, let me switch scenes real quick. So today I have my face up. You guys should be able to see me, right? This is me live. All right, I have the face mesh turned on, and so far we have two face mesh. Okay, we have face mesh, and then we have the retouching face mesh. So curious to see what direction we're gonna go with that. All right, and let's see. Yeah, just adding two face mesh so far. Renamed one of them, renamed one of our materials, and now we're moving forward to the very next step. Let's see. Oh wait, did I have you guys? Bet. All right.
Glossy highlights over the top of the face as well. So I'm going to double click on the face mesh and call it glossy mesh. And then over in the properties inspector where we have materials, I'm going to click plus and create a new material. I could just select the retouching again and put a double layer, but instead I'm going to create a new material. Gives me my standard white that we've seen, and we'll double click on that material to bring up its properties. And we're going to call this one glossy matte, just to make it, there we are, very clear what we're actually building here. And we can see those two materials over here now. So the next thing that we're going to explore is some of these more advanced render options that we see here. At the moment, our blend mode is set to alpha. Now our blend modes are really similar to the blend modes that we would see in image editing software. It's the algorithm that's determining how one layer, in this case the face mesh shader, is layered over the top of the layers below, which is the retouching mesh plus the camera feed in the background. And so when it's set to alpha, it just says, look, use whatever opacity and transparency in alpha is that mesh is generating, and use that to layer it over the layers below. But then we can also change the type, maybe from alpha to something like replace. We'll notice this didn't do anything, but replace is really similar to alpha, but it will ignore any transparency that that mesh shader is generating and just slap the diffuse colors straight over the top. We then have other options for things like subtract. So let's subtract, let's minus those bright areas of the shader from the camera feed below. We then also have multiply, which gives us this really strange kind of double shaded look, maybe quite cool for a robot face look. And then we also have things like screen, where we can take a bit of an additive model. It's a particular algorithm that kind of makes things look a bit softer than a straight add. But we really want to use the add for this look because it's going to be really cool. So let's switch it to add. You'll notice that things go very bright, quite over the top. But if we come up here, we're going to play with the diffuse and the specular settings to really see what that difference is between diffuse and specular. So for specular, I'm going to turn it on. We'll see it went a little bit brighter still. Maybe I'll turn that smoothness up, but we can't see much right now because there's so much brightness coming from this mesh that's being added over the top that we can't even see those highlights. So if we go to the diffuse settings where we have the color swatch, I can tap on that color swatch, turn the brightness all the way down to black, and now we can see that we have a black, shiny material that's being added over the top of my face, and all we have left are just those specular highlights. So if I drag it to the left, very broad highlight, drag it to the right, very tight, glossy, oily highlight, and we can play around with it from there. So from here, we're going to turn to the lighting, which is going to allow us to explore different lighting colors and
Okay, cool. So just following along with them, we have our retouching matte, our glossy matte as well. They're two different face mesh, and then they also have the materials that we created. I have my face here. Let me switch it to my studio real quick. My face is actually set on the checkerboard, and he has his set to the white mask. So I actually want to switch mines as well. So let me see. This is the actual mesh tracked face formation enable for material. You would think it's really under material. Shader property. I don't think that's it. Let's see. And they both, okay, so I have, so the one that's at the glossy mesh is correct. It's the retouching mesh that needs to be changed. So let me see what's different about the retouching mesh. Oh, it was the order in which I had them parented. Got you. So the retouching mesh needed to be on top of the glossy mesh. Okay. Okay. So now as we're changing some of the retouching, like the opacity, he changed the alpha to subtract. I want to run it back just a few, maybe about a minute, just to make sure I'm on the exact same page. Let's see. I'm gonna fast forward once I see what. Okay. Okay. So right here, he already has the retouch mesh and the face, or the second one, which would be the glossy. That was the one that wasn't parented. So he goes in and parents it, and he puts it above the retouch. So yeah, see, mine was like that. But when my glossy was above the retouch, that's when I got the 100% solid mask. So let me make sure. Let me follow.
Oh, and we can work with it from there. And so this one, I'm going to use to add some.
I see your question, Paul. I'm actually troubleshooting that right now as well. So I'm gonna see how. Let me make sure which order that it goes in real quick.
Glossy highlights over the top of the face as well. So I'm going to double click on the face mesh and call it glossy mesh. And then over in the properties inspector where we have materials, I'm going to click plus and create a new material. I could just select the retouching again and put a double layer, but instead I'm going to create a new material. Gives me.
Yeah. So retouching mesh. Oh, I didn't. I thought I did though. Yeah, I did. Retouching mesh. Oh, I never selected it when I created it. Okay. All right. So to be clear, Paul, we created both meshes, right? At the top, you go in, press plus. Let me make sure my mouse color is turned on. Okay. So at the top, we added two meshes, glossy and retouching. Once we have both of them in, you have to make the material for each of them. So for this, for the glossy mesh, this is the one that we actually kept as a standard. And then under the standard settings, this is where he went in, and we'll play this part, but he actually went in and started changing some of the blend options. The retouching mesh, which is the first one that we did, that material is the one that he actually had on retouching. So okay, there we go. There we go. So then let me see how his parenting is set up. Glossy is on top of meshing. Facts. Okay, good. So now as we play, we should be on the exact same page as he is.
Me my standard white that we've seen, and we'll double click on that material to bring up its properties, and we're going to call this one glossy matte, just to make it, oh, there we are, very clear what we're actually building here, and we can see those two materials over here now. So the next thing that we're going to explore is some of these more advanced render options that we see here. At the moment, our blend mode is set to alpha. Now our blend modes are really similar to the blend modes that we would see in image editing software. It's the algorithm that's determining how one layer, in this case the face mesh shader, is.
And yes, the glossy mesh, Paul, we want to make sure you're good. The glossy mesh is parented on top of the retouching mesh. Just make sure that both of those you've gone in and given a material to, and you should see those materials at your bottom left-hand corner.
Is layered over the top of the layers below, which is the retouching mesh plus the camera feed in the background. And so when it's set to alpha, it just says, look, use whatever opacity and transparency in alpha is that mesh is generating, and use that to layer it over the layers below. But then we can also change the type, maybe from alpha to something like replace. We'll notice this didn't do anything, but replace is really similar to alpha, but it will ignore any transparency that mesh shader is generating and just slap the diffuse colors straight over the top. We then have other options for things like subtract. So let's subtract, let's minus those bright areas of the shader from the camera feed below. We then also have multiply, which gives us this really strange kind of double shaded look, maybe quite cool for a robot face look. And then we also have things like screen, where we can take a bit of an additive model. It's a particular algorithm that kind of makes things look a bit softer than a straight ad. But we really...
All right, we're on the exact same page, so I want to take this moment to go in and make sure that we're all there. So again, went in and pressed plus for the objects tab and typed in mesh. Once you have both, well, one at a time, but once you go ahead and insert your mesh, then it will, and I'll go ahead and actually insert one so that we can see it from scratch. So once I go ahead and insert a new mesh, it wasn't necessarily tracking, right? If you look very closely, the checkerboard one is not tracking with the face right now. And it's simply based on the positioning within the hierarchy at the top left. So what you have to now go and do is simply click it and drag it into the hierarchy of the face tracker. Now, as you can see, the checkerboard one is now tracking the face along with the other two as well. So once you have that, you want to go ahead and name whatever it is, and I'll just put this one as test. Okay. Now that I have that asset, or excuse me, now that I have that face mesh up there, I have to assign a material. So now on the far right hand side, I have to press the plus and go to material. Now that I have material, I can now select between glassy or the retouching, which are the two that that we've created up until this point. All right, and then once you have those in, now we're just going through and playing with the different settings. What I also want to do really quickly is I haven't been doing the best job of this, but I do want to make sure that I'm taking some notes. I'm learning out loud, and I'm streaming so that I can always go back and watch myself do this and take notes. But I also want to make sure that we're keeping some notes live as well. So, or at least some general notes that we need to make sure when adding. I wonder if it'll let me do no, I won't worry about it. When adding your face mesh, it is recommended to rename them. Select the mesh and place it within the correct parenting structure within the hierarchy. Don't even play. Don't act like y'all know how to spell hierarchy. Stop playing. All right. Within the parenting hierarchy, select the mesh to add a material. We'll leave it with that because then adding material is its own other conversation essentially. So we'll rock it right here. Okay, let's get back to it.
We want to use the add for this look because it's going to be really cool. So let's switch it to add. You'll notice that things go very bright, quite over the top. But if we come up here, we're going to play with the diffuse and the specular settings to really see what that difference is between diffuse and specular. So for specular, I'm going to turn it on. We'll see it went a little bit brighter still. Maybe I'll turn that smoothness up, but we can't see.
Hold on, let me make a quick adjustment to my setup real quick. I think if I bring, did it stay?
Much right now because there's.
Oh yeah, we're in the game, yeah. So because of my setup, like I have, and it's all the technical stuff, but I have them basically separated between me viewing the screen, viewing the video, and my actual software. So that's why I'm missing stuff because it's like I'm looking at my software and he's talking about something over here. So now that I got them both in the same place, I love this a whole lot more. But when I set up my OBS stream, I set it up on one screen, so I wasn't even fully considering this. So we're in the game. All right, let's do it.
So much brightness coming from this mesh that's being added over the top that we can't even see those highlights. So if we go to the diffuse settings where we have the color swatch, I can tap on that color swatch, turn the brightness all the way down to black, and now we can see that we have a black shiny material that's being added over the top of my face. And all we have left are just those specular highlights. So if I drag it to the left, very broad highlight, drag it to the right, very tight, glossy, oily highlight, and we can play around with it over the top. But if we come up here, we're going to play with the diffuse and the specular settings to really see what that difference is between diffuse and specular. So for specular, I'm going to turn it on. We'll see it went a little bit brighter still. Maybe I'll turn that smoothness up, but we can't see much right now because there's so much brightness coming from this mesh that's being added over the top that we can't even see those highlights. So if we go to the diffuse settings where we have the color swatch, I can tap on that color swatch, turn the brightness all the way down to black, and now we can see that we have a black shiny material that's being added over the top of my face, and all we have left are just those specular highlights. So if I drag it to the left, very broad highlight, drag it to the right, very tight, glossy, oily highlight, and we can play around with it from there. So from here, we're going to turn to the lighting, which is going to allow us to explore different lighting colors and different lighting types, while also learning about how to move things around in 3D.
All right. I love that I got them both on the same screen. Now I feel like I'm in the game. I ain't gonna lie. Check me out now. Check me out. Y'all see it? Y'all see the face? Hold on. Let me widen this back out. How y'all feel? We in there? Talk to me. We can go back to the diffuse and we can change the brightness. Oh, you guys don't have the menus. I hate that. But if you go in and you click right here where that yours will be white, but if you go and click that diffuse, you can change the color and then you can go and change the brightness level. So I think I'm going to turn mine all the way down to the black so that it stays about like this. All right, so let's move on to the very next step.
Let's take those next steps on our journey of creating a floating robot face. And we're going to tackle the lighting now. So if we look at the lighting, if you remember from those previous lessons, when we have our directional light selected, if we're turning it on and off, we have quite a pronounced effect on the overall look that we're setting up here. If we select the ambient light and turn it on and off, you can see there's no difference at all. So two interesting things about our ambient light. The first is that it doesn't make any specular contribution. Because it's shining from all directions, it only contributes to that base rough layer of a material, not to its glossy highlights. The second thing is that because it's emitting from all directions at the same time, it has no manipulator, it has no handle inside the view. There's no difference. We're going to tackle the lighting now. So if we look at the lighting, if you remember from those previous lessons, when we have our directional light selected, if we're turning it on and off, we have quite a pronounced effect on the overall look that we're setting up here. If we select the ambient light and turn it on and off, you can see there's no difference at all. So two interesting things about our ambient light. The first is that it doesn't make any specular contribution. Because it's shining from all directions, it only contributes to that base rough layer of a material, not to its glossy highlights. The second thing is that because it's emitting from all directions at the same time, it has no manipulator, it has no handle inside the viewport. So it's not going to show up in here anywhere for us to position it or move it around. So because it's not affecting the look of our scene at all here, and we don't want it to interfere with this look as we craft it up, I'm just going to delete it by hitting the delete key with it selected. The directional light, however, it does matter where we rotate it in the scene. It doesn't matter where we position it because it appears to come from infinitely far away with lots of parallel light beams. So imagine it's infinitely far away. The only thing that matters is how we rotate it to change the direction of where that light is coming from. So with my directional light selected, hovering my cursor over the viewport, if I press the F key for focus or for frame, that moves the camera to focus on that light. And now from here, I have a few options for zooming in and getting a better look at it. Now we're going to start moving through 3D space. This is very much going to be like riding a bike. It's going to feel really awkward. We're working in 3D space on a 2D screen using a trackpad or a mouse and a keyboard. It's not supernatural, but trust me, spending some time with these controls, slowly you'll develop your muscle memory and everything's going to be totally fine. Okay, so to begin moving through 3D space, we can either, first of all, if you have a mouse, use the scroll wheel on your mouse to move the camera forward and closer to what we just hit F to frame up on. So I can use my scroll wheel on my mouse to zoom in and out. If you have a trackpad on a laptop, using a 2-finger swipe gesture may work as well for zooming in and out. And if you don't have a mouse and your 2-finger swipe gesture isn't working quite right, then if you're on a Mac, holding Command and Option, the two that are probably next to the spacebar, or if you're on Windows, Control and Alt. So Command and Option or Control and Alt, and then left click and drag will do the same thing and enable you to zoom in and out. So from here we can come in nice and close to my directional light manipulator in the viewport, and we can start to play around with it. So I'm just going to move my simulator window over here a little bit, undock it and move it over.
Okay.
And we now can see by default we have the translate manipulator selected, or the position manipulator. We have, for all these different manipulators, typically they operate on 3 axes, the x-axis, the y-axis, and the z-axis, which you may be familiar with from math or geometry classes. And each of those axes are represented by a color red or green or blue. So the really easy way to remember it.
Come on now. If y'all been rocking with me for any amount of time, I know Paul and Ty with me on this call, man. Y'all already know RGB. That's where I got it from. Well, I ain't gonna say that's where I got it from, but I always knew about X, Y, and Z. And then when we started rocking with, you know what I'm saying, learning how to day trade. So now we right back at RGB, but now RGB is gonna be about your X, your Y, and your Z. Your X is going to be like your horizontal. Your Y is going to be your vertical, and your Z is going to be your depth. Okay. So, and I always do this thing right here because this always helps me remember. But the thumb is pointed towards you, and you know that you have, you know, those 3. So let's go ahead and rock it out. Let's go ahead and rock it out. Let's go ahead and rock it out.
Is red, green, blue, RGB, X, Y, Z. X, Y, Z, RGB. So here we can see with my x-axis, I can click and drag that to move it around. Same thing with the y, same thing with z. But this is doing nothing, because if you remember, it doesn't matter where we position our directional light. It's not changing the look. It only matters how we rotate it. So let's switch to the rotate manipulator here. And we have a different icon show up here with a red arc, a green one, and a blue one for our X, Y, and Z axes. And what we'll see now is the Z axis, the blue one, isn't going to do anything because it's simply rotating the directional light around the axis that the light is traveling along. But if we grab the green one and rotate it, you'll see the light now appears to be coming from the side of my face. If we rotate it over the other way, the light now appears to be coming from the other side.
All right. So essentially what he went in and did was go ahead and delete the ambient lighting. Okay. Apparently the ambient lighting is going to be for your environment, so to speak. And in this case, for this particular video, we're only focusing on the directional light, okay? So under the directional light, let me see if, I don't know how to get it back to the other type. I figure R was gonna be it. Because he didn't even say what the keyboard shortcut, rotational. Oh, bet. So it's actually at the top. Perfect. So at the very, very top, and this is probably small on you guys' end. Here, let me let me try to zoom it in for y'all real quick just so you can see it. All right, so right here at the very, very top, okay, you're going to be able to see these three options right here. These three options are what is actually changing the directional light. So if I want to, if you look at both the viewer right here in the middle, as well as the setting that I'm changing, then you'll be able to see what I'm getting at. So the positioning changes right here. This allows you to be able to grab it, go up and down, and things like that. Then there's the rotational one, which is in the middle. This is going to be what he was just doing, where we can change the rotation of the different axes, RGB still, and just change the different tilt. Now, if you look at me, if you look at the actual preview, then you'll see that there are changes being made to how the light is actually hitting my face. Okay, this is really cool. So you can change it to whatever angles specifically that you want using this tool. And then I also see over here on the left hand side, you can go in and type in specifically what numbers you want. So if I type 0, 0, and 0, it'll bring us back to what the original positioning was, if it was at that. And then we can go in and heighten it by changing the Y, lower it, things like that. All right. So that's where we're at so far with our 3D lighting. Let's go ahead and make this back regular size for you all. I wish we were able to see the menus. That's like the only thing we're really missing. Boom. Transform center. Okay, cool. All right, let's get back to it.
And if we put it back in the middle and grab the red axis for X, you can see we can make it tilt up so it appears higher in the sky and the light is higher up above my face, shining down from above. And I can also rotate it the other way to make it appear that the light is shining up at me from underneath. So in this way, we can position exactly where we want that light to appear to be coming from. And for this look, I'm going to set it to be from the side. Sometimes our handle gets a little bit wacky. It's called gimbal lock. And so we just keep rotating until we find it. And I'm going to position it over on the left-hand side here. Cool. I'm happy with that. So now we want to explore some different light types. But before we do, it's going to be really handy to add some extra 3D geometry to our scene. First of all, to complete the look, but secondly, because it really illustrates the differences in these different light types. And so the piece of geometry I'm going to add, if I go to add object here, is a plane. So it's a generic, infinitely flat 3D plane. I'm going to select it and choose insert. And this time we can see it floating here in 3D space. It's not moving with my head. We can see it staying static because it's not a child of the face tracker here. And this is exactly how we want it. So with the plane selected, I can press that F key, and we're now getting a lot of intersection between that plane and the face mesh that we can see. But we're now going to develop some more skills on top of zooming in and out to rotate around in our scene, to orbit around, as well as to track and pan. So first of all, if I hold down the Command key or the Control key and left click and drag, then that enables me to rotate and orbit. So if you're on Mac or Windows, Command or Control, left click and drag.
Now this is super useful. So I was playing around yesterday after we had got off the session, and I was just playing around with my scene, and now being able to fully know, like, okay, the focus button, I needed that so bad yesterday when I was trying to figure that thing out. Man, what you know? Let's screw this so I could turn it sideways. I made sure I wasn't gonna make this fall. Oh, I might need a screwdriver for this one. Yeah, that's two on there. So yeah, so being able to put F for focus is huge. I needed that. And then being able to orbit around your space um as you're making your experience. Like that's another one that I absolutely needed. So command, holding down command and rotating it allows you to see it at the different perspectives and vantage points. Perfect, perfect, perfect.
We'll rotate around that thing that we last selected and press F to frame up on. And then we have the Option or the Alt key. If you're on Mac or Windows, hold down Option or Alt and left click and drag to move up, down, or left and right. And so with that, we've got all the control we need to move in and out, forwards and back, left, right, up, down, and rotate around. And so I really recommend just spending a moment getting a feel for how we move through 3D space, because as we start to construct effects that have lots of 3D objects in them, it can really help to move around the viewport and work out what we're doing. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit. And we've seen the position manipulator, though we haven't seen it do much just yet. We've seen the...
All right, so I am kind of getting the hang of it. It's like he said. So, like as far as like kind of just kind of like a bike. So, here, let me get you guys back sized up correctly. So essentially, the main things that he's kind of showing us right here is the F. All right, that's gonna zoom you into whatever you have selected. So if I select glossy mesh and press F, it focused me in frame for the glossy mesh. If I select the plane and I press F, it's gonna zoom me all the way into that plane. So I really, really like that. It's gonna bring you directly to whatever you need. Because I was struggling yesterday, I ain't gonna lie. So let's say we are on the plane, but I want to see the plane from the whole broad view. Well, I use a Magic Mouse on Apple, but you guys can use whatever mouse that has that sliding. So I'm just gonna slide up on my mouse, and it's zooming me out. Super, super, super useful. So that I can see a better perspective of it. Well, what if you wanted to look at it spot on? What if you wanted to look at it, right in front of it? Well, then you want to hold down your command and then click and drag with your mouse. Okay, Vic, get a little bit closer. You can then use your mouse on your right hand side to get closer so that you can see. All right, use command and click to rotate it. Command and click to rotate it. And then if you say, okay, I actually want to move it down a little bit. Let's move it down and then zoom in. Well, then you're going to want to press Option and then click and drag. All right. Option is going to allow for you to move it like this, where it stays on that specific plane, not to confuse it with the other plane, but it allows for you to stay on that plane. And then command is going to be the one that allows for you to rotate around. And then your zoom in and out is going to be with your mouse. Okay. So with that being said, oh, and then you have your features up here. All right. To go ahead and position different ports. So with that being said, I think that's all, we're all caught up on everything at that point. So making sure you have those features down pat. So as you start creating your experiences, you can actually manipulate and move around and not get frustrated with that. All right, let's get into it.
Rotate manipulator. Let's have a look at the scale manipulator. We have the Z axis here. If I click and drag that one, it doesn't do anything because the plane only has 2 dimensions at present. So it's infinitely flat. If I grab the green one for Y, I can scale the plane up and make it taller. The red for X, I can scale it wider. And you'll notice that for each of these handles, we've also got a little square here that enables me to scale on both of those axes at the same time. So I can make this really big. Next problem we need to solve is you'll see that if I move backwards, at some point I start to cut through that.
Wait, he said there was a way to move them both at the same time. I'm trying to find that.
So I'm going to zoom out a little bit. And we've seen the position manipulator, though we haven't seen it do much just yet. We've seen the rotate manipulator. Let's have a look at the scale manipulator. We have the Z axis here. If I click and drag that one, it doesn't do anything because the plane only has 2 dimensions at present. So it's infinitely flat. If I grab the green one for Y, I can scale the plane up and make it taller. The red for X, I can scale it wider. And you'll notice that for each of these handles, we've also got a little square here that enables me to scale on both of those axes at the same time. So I can make...
Got you. All right, boom. So if we take a look right now, we have our plane in there. We select the plane. I'm gonna go in and focus on it. So we're gonna zoom all the way in. At the very, very top, you have the directional button, the rotation button, and then you have the scale. So I'm gonna go ahead and select the scale, and that's gonna change, you know, the RGB thing that we have in the middle. That's gonna change it from the arrow to the circle to having dots at the end. So when you have the dots, if you select any one of the dots, so right now I have the R, which is going to be our horizontal RGB, right? Horizontal, vertical, depth. If I select the R, it's going to allow for me to horizontally stretch it. If I select the G, the green, the vertical, is going to allow for me to go and stretch it vertically. If I select Z, or the depth, or blue, RGB, you're not going to see anything because this is a 2D plane. There's only horizontal and vertical, okay? So then, instead of having to do your vertical or horizontal independently, there's also a feature that allows for you to select two at the same time. And when you hover over it, right, and you really got to look closely, but if you, there's squares on here as well. So you have the dots that are colored, but then you also have squares on here. And when you hover over one of the squares, it'll highlight the two lines that are associated with the two that it will help you stretch. So if you're trying to, in this case, stretch our X and our Y, we're trying to go taller and wider, then we will want to go in and select the blue square. The blue square is changing our X and our Y. So if you look in our preview window, you see how it's going, you know, it's moving at a locked ratio, essentially, just going smaller and bigger. Versus if I selected the red is now changing the depth and the height. So as I stretch this up, we're only seeing the height change because, again, there is no depth feature in this particular one. So I'm going to select plane, press F. I'm going to zoom out a bit so that I can see the entire way that this is going to play out. I'm going to grab the blue handle or blue square, and then I'm going to stretch it so that the checkerboard is filling up my entire frame. And then I'm going to come back to the video so that we can go ahead and move on.
Make this really big. Next problem we need to solve is you'll see that if I move backwards, at some point I start to cut through that plane. I start to clip through it because it's too close to me. So to avoid this happening, which is going to look unappealing in my effect, I'm going to switch to the position manipulator, grab that Z axis, and that enables me to move it all the way back in space, get it really far away, so I'm never going to accidentally cut through it. I can then switch back to scale it up a bit bigger, make it fit completely around that simulator, so we've got a nice consistent look. Now there are lots of more sophisticated ways to set up background colors inside Spark, but this is the easiest one that we're taking for today. I'm now going to move my simulator over a little bit, just so I can apply a material to this plane. Of course, it's currently showing the checkerboard because nothing's applied. So I'm just going to click plus, create a new material. We'll double click on that new material, and we can see we've got some reasonable settings. It's just flat white showing up there and no specular, but that's totally fine. I might actually grab the flat white and just turn it down a little bit so we can really see what the lights are doing. And next thing that we want to tackle is it's now starting to look, we can see we've built this floating robot face look, but it's looking really creepy. You may like this, you may not. And we can make it look a bit less creepy by going into the face tracker and getting our glossy mesh and turning the eyes.
Hold on, I have in. So here, let me pull up Studio for you guys. So I have my. Let's see, where are we at with it? So I'm on my plane. I created a material for the plane. Double click to open up the material. Yeah, see, mine's is showing as still that dark black. versus I should be, I have it as set to red and it's not changing. So if that's the material for alpha, flat, there we go. Yeah, come on, Photoshop days. Okay, bet. We're getting somewhere. We're getting somewhere, ladies and gentlemen. We're getting somewhere. So let me go back a little bit. I want to see specifically what he did to his, though.
Today, I'm now going to move my simulator over a little bit, just so I can apply a material to this plane. Of course, it's currently showing the checkerboard because nothing's applied. So I'm just going to click plus, create a new material. We'll double click on that new material and we can see we've got some reasonable settings. It's just flat white showing up there and no specular, but that's totally fine. I might actually grab the flat white and just turn it down a little bit so we can really see what the lights are doing. And next thing that we want to tackle is it's now starting to look, we can see we've built this floating robot face. Look.
Yeah, that's weird because as I'm watching his portion back, he didn't necessarily change the shader type. When my shader, oh yeah, mine was probably just tweaking out. Mine was probably just tripping. Because now that I have it, let's see. When I had it on alpha, okay. I had my blend mode on back, cold mode on back. Oh, showing that side of okay. All right. So now let's tweak this a little bit. Brightness. Um, Make it a little more red. Um, oh wait, maybe I need to just be it. It's like I'm not affecting the settings right now or the properties to the plane. Color. Let's change it to green. Yeah, I'm not seeing the effects of my. Hmm. The material is here. We got flat. Okay, I think we're in there now. Okay, I think we're in there now. Red. Okay, there we go. There we go. Okay, okay. So then let's go in and adjust the brightness. Okay, there we go. I don't know. It seemed like just clicking around a few times because it's bringing up the exact same settings that I was on. So, okay. So let's do we're doing robot. Let's do a dark blue type of vibe. Slider. Yeah. Okay, cool. Let's just rock it like that. We won't get lost up in the details, but I wanted to make sure that I was doing the exact things. Screen. I do want to just see what the differences are. Okay. Alpha. That's the subtract. Multiply. I like multiply. So we can still see the background a little bit. All right, let's rock it like that. Do. All right, bet. Yes, sir. Come on, Paul. R is also your X, which is also your horizontal. G, which is also your Y, is also your vertical. And then B is also your Z and also your depth. That's a good note right there, ladies and gentlemen. I would take that note if I was you. I would take that note if I was you for sure. Appreciate that, Brody.
But it's looking really creepy. You may like this, you may not. And we can make it look a bit less creepy by going into the face tracker and getting our glossy mesh and turning the eyes and the mouth back on again. So removing the checkboxes to create those holes, and we end up just with the face floating around in space, which looks cute and interesting.
That's funny.
Okay, so let's move on to the next lights now that our plane's set up. That's going to help us demonstrate them as well. We have our directional light, which doesn't matter where we position it, but it does matter where we rotate it. Perfect. Let's have a look at the point light, which is a little bit different. So if I go to Add Object and scroll down, you'll see we have an option for point light, and we can insert it to create a new point light. We've already seen it light up a little bit. I'm now going to move around using my Command and Control, or my Control and Alt settings, and left click and drag. Just keep clicking away, keep using the keyboard, and it'll start to feel more natural. I can now have a look at the point light. So with the point light, it does not matter how it's rotated. It's shining out light in every direction, but it does matter where it's positioned. So however close it is to something is how much it's going to light that object up. So if I were to grab just that Z-axis and move it backwards, you'll see we start to get a pool of light that gets smaller and smaller and brighter the closer it gets to that background plane. So we can see here it's getting an interesting gradient showing up here behind my head. But if I were to drag it out in front of my face, just as we were doing with the scale manipulator, we can go on one axis at a time. So the Z-axis or the X-axis, or I can grab the plane handle to go on Z and X at the same time. And you can see here I'm able to move it around to the left side of my face where the directional light is shining from, or the right side of my face. So let's have a look at some other settings. Of course, if I want to make this look, start crafting this look in, I could maybe go into the color of the light and change it to something that's looking a bit more sci-fi. Maybe make that blue. And I could go back to the directional light and craft in a color for that one as well. You can see this directional light is quite strongly illuminating the background as well. But now we can see very clearly that difference between the contributions of the directional light and the point light. Let's now look at one last light type, which is the spotlight. And the spotlight matters both where we put it and how it's rotated. So let's go to Add Object. We'll scroll down and create a spotlight type and click Insert. And you can see this one, the manipulator looks a little bit different still. The icon for the light has this cone. If I grab the blue axis, the Z axis, and move it back, you'll see how we're now getting something that looked quite similar to what the point light was doing. It's creating a narrower bright patch on that background plane. You'll see here we've got a few more controls here going on now. First of all, there's range, which is how far should that light spray out into the scene. So how dim should it get the further away we get from that light? We can use range to control that. Next, we've got options for the outer angle, which is how wide it's spraying out, and then the inner angle, which helps us to define the softness of the edge. So you'll see here, if we make a very tight cropped one, we now have a very clearly defined circle that the spotlight is shining out through. And if I were to go to rotate, we can see how it's operating just like a torch, that it's shining out along the direction that it's spraying. It's turning into more of an oval shape as we're tilting it down relative to the plane. So for my spotlight here, I'm going to rotate to the side here. We can see it a bit more clearly. I'm going to select my move manipulator, and we can now either move backwards along the axis of the light itself, or up and down along that y-axis, or I could grab that handle and move it up. For this one, I want to use this light as a decorative light just for the background here. So I'm going to make my inner angle a bit smaller, the outer angle a bit smaller as well, so we can create just a nice tight little kind of gradient Maybe I'll put it a bit off to one side, make it a bit asymmetrical, and I could play around with some colors as well.
All right, I'll just show you guys as I'm. I'm tripping. My bad. I didn't know y'all was looking at mine this whole time. I apologize. I actually would have preferred y'all to look at what he was doing so that, um, I mean, it's probably the same because we're hearing it and doing it at the same time. So we added in a few different lights, right? So I have the spotlight, which is the one that I'm manipulating right now. If I turn it off visibly, you can see the effect that it's having on my space. Okay, so let's see. Let's change the spotlight to like a yellow. Okay, and then we had the point light as well. Let's see what the point light is, what effect. So we apparently have a blue point light. Yes, as we can see, because I was looking like directly at the did we lose our video? I was looking directly at the there we go. At the preview window, and it showed like you could see that light that's hitting the side of my face a little bit. Here, let me actually do this. Let me scoot over a little bit and make this a little bit bigger. And with my point light, if you guys can see on my face, I'm rotating the point light across horizontally. So as you should see it kind of swiping across my face. It's swiping across my face as I'm moving over using the X, which is the red, okay? And then I'm gonna now change it vertically, which is the G. And see, it's not, you can see it making a small adjustment as I pull it vertically. Cool, I really like this. And then our spotlight, that's the one that you can see it even in my background. Like I'm gonna move it completely out the frame. The spotlight is now out the frame, so you can't see my background, which is red. My plane is a deep reddish type color. But as I bring that spotlight back into the frame, all right, that's gonna now bring that spotlight back, or bring that visual back. Let me bring it closer to see what effect that's having on it. Yeah, you can actually see it moving and changing the intensity on my face. This is really cool. Nice. All right, let's get back to it.
To see if we can get something looking curious. I quite like that simple soft gradient. Maybe I can turn the range up, make it a bit brighter. And there we go. So I've now made my very strange and abstract floating face robot, through which we've explored layering different face meshes. We've looked at different light types and properties. We've looked at blend modes for how we're layering shaders over the top of each other. And we've started to develop our skills for moving 3D objects and ourselves through the world. Next, we're going to look at just some last complicated bits to advance our skills even further before we come to publishing.
How we feeling? How we feeling, man? That was amazing, bro. I feel like I'm really getting better, all right? Like the fact that we were able to go in and start manipulating, even moving in the space. That's probably my biggest takeaway. Like being able to literally move around in the space, move my objects around. That was a big one for me because again, when I downloaded and we got off the session yesterday, I started playing around a little bit more. Just with the tools here. Let me bring in. I never did. Let me bring in a camera to my studio scene. All right, bet. Y'all don't mind if I come in here with y'all, do y'all? All right. So here, just as I'm, you know what I'm saying, doing some last minute things because I know this session's been pretty long. Command is gonna allow for me to go ahead and move around and see what all I'm actually looking at. I can actually get a better angle and see, the angle in which the video is happening. Option and clicking is going to allow for me to move it from a 2D plane perspective. The mouse is going to allow for me to zoom in and out, and then whenever I have something selected specifically, let's say the plane, I can go and press F and it'll zoom me in right there. As you can see, even within my my preview, right? Let's just see the effect that I ended up with. All right, this is the light and everything that you can see on my face. You can see the intensity. Can we all agree that that yellow is a little too harsh? Let's go in and let's reduce that down a little bit. All right. So what will we need to do? I need to know first which light is that's causing that yellow. So when I go click on my point light, I look to the right and I see, okay, I have a blue set for that. My spotlight, excuse me. Boom. Oh wait, I didn't mean to do that. Okay. My spotlight, I got my hand in front of me. My spotlight, however, when I click that, I notice that color is yellow. So let me go in and manipulate how intense that is a little bit, or let's even go in and just change the positioning. Let's move it off to the side a little bit. All right, I think that. Oh, the rotation, but then also let's actually pull it a little this way. Yeah, so it's a little off my face. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I like that. Okay, I like that. So now, here, let's move it down a little bit more. A little closer. All right, boom. So now we can see the reflections of the yellow. We can see the background, right? If I turn off my point light, so we know what all lights are doing, right? The point light is giving me that extra little blue little flare on my face, right? If I turn off my spotlight is giving me the whole coloring in my background as well as on my actual face. Okay, that's that yellow look that we're getting. My directional light, all right, is the light that I'm getting on the other side. That's the first light we created, and I'm getting that on my other side of my face. Let me actually change the color of that so that we can see a distinction. You see that green? That's what we're getting right there. Let me turn down like the grayscale brightness, turn it up and down a little bit right there. Okay. So yeah, that's everything essentially that we cover in this setting. Turning them on and off to isolate that is really helpful as well. And then again, I have my plane that I can turn on and off as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, man, with that being said, I definitely appreciate you guys for tuning in. I think we learned a lot. We troubleshooted a lot. But again, all of these little things are going to help in our experience. This is day 3. Day 30 is going to be extremely powerful. And with that being said, I'll see you all on the very next stream tomorrow.